Good Monday afternoon. My name is Eliana Schreiber with NBC 15 News. Wisconsin Republicans are headed to the ballpark this morning, but they aren't there to see a baseball game. They want to talk about the future of the Brewers. So Wisconsin Assembly Speaker Robin Vos and fellow Republicans gathered right now at American Family Field and are expected to reveal their plan for the Major League Baseball franchise. Let's take a listen in right now.
To keep the ballpark up to the standards that were set in the original lease. And unfortunately, the amount of money that was generated and has been spent so far doesn't even allow the team to remain in Wisconsin unless something is done as quickly as possible. Now, I come from a part of Wisconsin where the original Brewers deal wasn't all that popular. So I promise you today, the deal that we are putting together and set to announce is good for the taxpayers, it's good for the state, and it's good for the team. Those are the three things that we really focused on, is making sure we have something that everybody can look at and realize it's a win for Wisconsin. You'll hear from my colleagues that the entire plan is focused on making sure that the people who come into the ballpark, that's the players and the fans, are the ones who are entirely responsible for helping to keep the team here. So with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Representative Brooks and Senator Fine, who are the authors of the bill, and then we'll take questions at the end. Representative Brooks.
Thank you, Robin, and I really want to thank Speaker Vos for the opportunity to work on these negotiations. These negotiations started shortly after the governor put out his proposal to use one-time money. The bill we're presenting today is the result of those months of negotiations with the Brewers, the Speaker, my colleagues in the Senate, Senator Fine and Senator Lemieux, and our staffs. We've consulted with Democratic leadership during the process, and we've had conversations with them, and they in turn have had conversations with the county exec, the mayor, and the governor. A great deal of research has gone into this deal as well. I'd like to thank the Legislative Fiscal Bureau and the Reference Bureau for all their hard work throughout the process as well. So as the Speaker said, why are we here today? As you know, the stadium is largely owned by the citizens of the state of Wisconsin. We currently have a lease. Our tenant, the Milwaukee Brewers, it will expire in 2030. We have a contractual obligation to maintain the facility. As the Speaker indicated, we currently do not have enough funds in those accounts to maintain our contractual obligation and could be in default as soon as next year. Therefore, we needed to do something sooner rather than later. As I said, the governor put together a proposal that could potentially keep the Brewers through 2043, but in my opinion did not fully fund the two studies that were completed. One of those studies indicated a need of about $430 million to get us through 2040. The state had an alternative study done that indicated north of $600 million. Our proposal you have before you today extends the Brewers and keeps them here through 2050. And I think that's an important distinction, keeps them here through 2050. Our deal raises no taxes. It's cheaper to keep them. Our annual investment from the state is tied directly to a portion of player personnel, both the home team and visiting team. So as Senator Fine said at one of our meetings, if you don't play second base for the Brewers or the Cubs or the Yankees, your income taxes are not going to this deal. You know, unlike other businesses that may close or shutter, you know, they're going to find alternative jobs in the community. If the Brewers leave, there is no question that all of that income tax leaves the state of Wisconsin. Again, it's cheaper to keep them. Our deal requires a local contribution from the city and the county, something the governor's deal did not require. Our deal also changes the stadium board makeup to focus more on people that have an interest, not a business interest, but a viable interest and knowledge of how to operate a stadium. One of the big things in here is we have a beautiful closed stadium. We are going to winterize the stadium. This venue will be a year-round facility that can be used for truck show, monster truck shows, concerts, whatever it may be, which will generate additional tax revenue. Currently, there's about $225 million worth of sales directly attributed to the facility now. So this will be a year-round facility that can maintain a 70-degree temperature even when it's 10 below outside. One of the other things we heard from the public, besides trying to make it a year-round facility and more usable to other people other than the Brewers, was how much are the Brewers going to contribute? We've asked the Brewers to step up, and they have. The Brewers are going to contribute an additional $100 million over the term of the contract, and that is in addition to their current rent and other capital investments. People have asked, how does it benefit Spooner, Wisconsin, Eau Claire, Wisconsin, Rhinelander, Beloit, Wisconsin? Well, with the new shared revenue formula, 1% of all the sales here go to every community in the state. And we're only going to use about 2/3 of the income tax on an annual basis. So every community in the state of Wisconsin benefits from keeping the Brewers. Again, it's cheaper to keep them. So before I turn it over to Senator Fine, again, I just want to thank Speaker Voss and the Milwaukee Brewers for all their time and dedication in getting us to where we are today. It's important to note that this is a bill we're dropping today, so it will go through the normal process. I anticipate some amendments, some changes, but I think we've got it to a really good spot. I think the Brewers will be releasing a statement, if they haven't already, endorsing this package, and I'll turn it over to Senator Fine to walk through some of the finer points.
Good morning. First and foremost, I want to thank my colleagues, Senator Lemieux, Representative Brooks, Speaker Voss. Also, I want to thank our staff for the countless hours they put in working on this. This bill is a bill that will keep professional baseball in Milwaukee, Wisconsin till at least 2050. And I'm pleased as a fan and as a legislator that the Brewers will be here and want to be here till 2050. As Representative Brooks mentioned, we will be utilizing the income tax generated by the players who play at American Family Field and the Brewers front office staff. All payments made will be made to the stadium district to maintain this ballpark. We, the state of Wisconsin, have a responsibility to make sure that this ballpark is maintained to Major League Baseball standards. It is estimated that the income tax generated at this ballpark in 2023 will be $12.8 million, accounting for a $12.8 million contribution from the state to the stadium district in 2023. Additional yearly payments are estimated at 4% growth, so that in 2035, the income tax will exceed $20 million per year. This is when our maximum contribution from the tax will be set at $20 million per year. Also, in the final years of the lease, these payments will drop a little bit. A 4% rate of growth is a conservative number. Most studies show that Major League Baseball salaries rise much faster than 4%. There will also be local funding from Milwaukee County and the City of Milwaukee, because they have the most to benefit by having professional baseball in their community. We will also be using the $300,000 generated annually from the district license plate fees. The Milwaukee Brewers will also be making an investment with higher rent and a total commitment of $100 million over the 27 years. Remember, this is utilizing income tax from professional baseball players and those working for the Brewers. If the Brewers were to leave, the income tax revenue leaves the state with them. The one thing that we are not talking about is the state and local sales tax revenue that will be collected due to the Brewers being here. That is something that will benefit the entire state of Wisconsin, especially now that we have tied shared revenue to the sales tax. This bill is a benefit for Wisconsin and all Wisconsin municipalities. Thank you.
I just want to add that we really want to thank and appreciate the Brewers ownership who are staying in Wisconsin. We know that it is challenging and that there are other opportunities for them to move around the country, which might be economically more advantageous in the short run. But I really want to say thank you to the Brewers ownership and the entire team for the commitment that they are making to keep playing baseball in Wisconsin. I think that is a huge benefit for our state, and I want to make sure that we do not let a moment go by without expressing our appreciation for the team and what they do for our community. And with that, we're happy to answer some questions.
Okay, well, thank you for the question. So the state is going to contribute approximately $400 million. There is over, as Senator Fine said, $600 million that will be coming directly from player personnel, both the home team and away team. Ballpark numbers, pardon the pun, sales tax revenue, again, I said, was about $200 and some million attributed directly to the park. That's gross sales, and then we have 5% of that. Some people will argue not all of that will go away, clearly, if the Brewers were to leave, but I will tell you 14% of the people that attend here are from out of state. So even if we use that 14% number, that's 60-some million that the state would lose from out of state. You know, again, that number is much larger if you extrapolate it out. And then if you look at the city and county, we're still in negotiations, and we're dropping the bill today, hopefully to get that ball moving. As you can imagine, we've had a busy, year here in the, Capitol, trying to get the budget done and shared revenue. So this is the first step in that. We've asked for the local communities to come up with anywhere from 135 million to 203 million. The bill's spelling out 203 million. We're hoping that this is a bipartisan bill that can be moved along with both Democrat and Republican votes and having them contribute. Again, using the new shared revenue formula, there's a 2% city sales tax, the 0.9%, county sales tax, and we're asking for a portion of that to be sent here. Now, if they have other alternatives or other ways of financing their contribution, we've said all along throughout our negotiations we're willing to listen.
Just following up. I think the most important thing for us to remember is that this is a partnership between the state, the team, and the locals. And it's not a gross number. I know you're going to report the gross number between now and 2050. It's an annual number that each contributes to. So the state of Wisconsin provides most of the money to the players' salaries, and there is approximately $7.5 million between the city and the county on an annual basis going forward that will contribute to that number, which is approximately $20 to $25 million per year. State funding through the income tax, local funding from the $7.5 million.
The Brewers' commitment is an additional $100 million on top of the $40-50 million that they already are contributing. So it's $100 million on top of this. So the Brewers' contribution is going to be about $150 million. And it's important to note, if you take the governor's proposal of $290 million and use the time value of money with interest, it's almost exactly $400 million. Correct. There is some interest earnings, but it is not a sizable amount because we're doing it on an annual basis.
Well, that number's not actually accurate.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, that's been one of our problems here is, and it's one of the reasons we're looking at making some changes is we were under the assumption there was $70 million in the account as well. That is not the case. It turns out there's going to be maybe 10 that can transfer over to the new stadium board. There is money that was invested, about $30 million, $27 million, into T-bills a number of years ago that puts $2 million annually for a number of years into the stadium board segregated account for reserves. But there is not nearly the $70 million that was accounted for, and some of that $70 million has already been spent. So we're anticipating $10 to $15 million only to be available for cash.
Which is
Speaker,
part of the reason that we have a challenge with being able to have the current lease even continue, because the money isn't there like we thought. Correct. It increases over time. The local number is fixed. That $7.5 million is the same over the entire lease. Our number increases to a cap of $20 million as player salaries go up. So the first year, it's going to be about $13 million, $13.4 million, and we're going to have all this information for you so you can see the fiscal bureau memos and all the details. It's actually very similar to how we did the Bucks deal, where we took the players' salaries, it's an approximate number, and we put that in as the contribution from the state. So as my colleague said, if no one plays ball in this stadium, no taxes generated. If they continue to play, that number increases over time, and a portion of that, about 2/3, will go to fund the maintenance of the stadium.
Speaker, at this point, do you have the votes to pass the Assembly? Senator Sane in the Senate?
So we've had really good conversations in the Assembly Republican caucus. I don't want to predict until members have had an opportunity to review the entire deal, but we have talked about this multiple times in the caucus, and I think people are generally comfortable with the idea that if you live anywhere in Wisconsin, including southeastern Wisconsin, there's no more taxes, there's no more requests than we're asking for today, which is literally just the player salaries, keeping them here so the team stays here. If they leave, the entire state loses.
Is there still work to do?
There's always more opportunity to have discussions, right? So my goal is to have this be a bipartisan bill. It's not going to be a partisan bill. It's got to be signed by Governor Evers. I think Democrats and Republicans should both look at the details and understand that if the team leaves, it is more expensive for the state. So as my colleagues have said, it is definitely better for the taxpayer to keep the team here than to have them leave. Hopefully that appeals to people in every part of the state and in both political parties. Well, I think part of it is, number one, the most direct economic benefit for keeping the team here accrues to the city and the county of Milwaukee. You're going to see in the Fiscal Bureau memo, because of the sales taxes that they collect, if the team leaves, they have the most to lose. So perhaps as they had the discussion, of course, everybody would like somebody else to pay for everything, but that is not the reality of the economy that we live in. When Lambeau Field had to be renovated, we asked the local community to step up, and granted, they did almost all of it themselves. When the initial sales tax was put into effect, it was the 5 counties that paid for this beautiful facility to be built. It's a different model this time. So my hope is that we see that the vast majority of the revenue that's being provided is not from the city and the county. It comes, I think, about 2/3 from the state, a proportionate number from the city and the county, and then the locals. So I think it's a good deal for everybody, and my hope is that once they look at the entire deal, they will realize that letting the Brewers leave would be bad for southeastern Wisconsin, especially the city and the county.
So again, keep in mind this is a first bill drop. It's going to go through the hearing process. The Brewers, we know we have to bring in the Democrats on this deal, so there's going to be ongoing negotiations. So right now, currently, the way the bill is drafted, the governor has 4 appointments. If the governor wants to relinquish a couple of those appointments, to the county exec and the, city, we're willing to listen. If they're willing to pony up with the $200 million we've requested, we can certainly open up negotiations on representation on the board. So I'm not going to say no, nor is our caucus or the Senate going to say no. We understand if you're going to make that fiscal contribution, you're going to want some representation. But we don't have that commitment from them yet. Yes, we will be putting out numerous Fiscal Bureau memos and the bill at about 10:30 today. You will be inundated with information. Like I said, this is not something that was thrown together haphazardly. We have done a ton of research to make sure our numbers are right. The last thing I want to do is have my kids and grandkids 10, 15 years from now going, Grandpa, what were you thinking? You know, why didn't you fully fund this? I guarantee you this is going to be fully funded. So we've done a ton of work, and again, the Speaker Voss said the Brewers have been exceptional partners because both the VSG and ICON studies had scheduled draws and repair schedules, and we've gone through those extensively with them to make sure we're going to be able to fully fund this strictly through that tax on the income. You know, I'm going to let the Brewers answer that, but clearly baseball is a very, very competitive industry. You know, and they have, and the speaker said, they have a lot of opportunities, you know, and we're just grateful they're going to stay here. I don't think it's their intention to leave, but clearly we can't ask them to stay in a stadium and operate under a lease where we're not meeting our obligations. So the talk of them leaving, I really don't want to focus on. I want to focus on the fact we're doing everything we can without raising taxes to keep them, and make it cheaper to keep them here in Wisconsin for all of us.
And the one thing I want to add too is that for the people who are out there that are skeptics that say, why should we help fund this at all? Number one, I just want to be perfectly clear. The state of Wisconsin owns this facility. If the Brewers leave, we will continue to own this facility, so the taxpayers are on the hook, whether we like it or not. So it is a better deal for the taxpayer. Whether you ever come to a Brewer game or you ever come to a concert at this venue, it is definitely better for the taxpayer to have revenue being generated here to keep the team and all the economic benefits than it would be to have them leave. That's just the most important thing I hope you can help us get across to people, because there are folks who, number one, think the Brewers own this facility. They do not. The state of Wisconsin does. There are people who believe that we're giving some kind of a massive subsidy. We are not. All we're doing is keeping up with our contractual obligation to say that this ballpark has to be at baseball standards. No money is going to the Brewers. This is not some kind of a thing where we are writing a check out to the team. It is only to be used for this facility to make sure that it can continue to be operated. And most importantly, I heard from people even this weekend, once the early reports went out, the thing that they were most excited about was the weatherization of the stadium. So we now have the opportunity for not just a few months a year, but for the entire year to have concerts, which again are good for the economy, generate revenue for the locals and the state, and help to increase the amount of money that we can use for all the other priorities of the state. No, it's going to allow the facility to be used 12 months of the year. Yeah, it's mostly, because obviously I think you probably know they drain everything when the winter comes and it basically sits vacant. We have not talked to the governor. We have had conversations with our Democratic colleagues, and that's part of the discussion that we are going to continue ongoing. My hope is that they engage in a meaningful way to be able to show us what they can support, why that this, if they want to make changes to this deal. I think these gentlemen have done a really good job putting together a package that, you know, with a few tweaks, should be able to get all the way through the legislature. But of course, if there are other people who bring forward ideas that make it even better, we have to be open to listening. So the hope is the bill's going to be introduced today. I think it's for a week of co-sponsorship, right? So our hope is to have a hearing sometime in the end of September, early October. And assuming support is there, which, you know, we have to let the legislators read it and digest it, we'd probably have a vote sometime in October. Correct. Yeah, this is just, that's a good point. It's everything just inside the walls. It doesn't require the taxpayers or anybody to do development outside the building. If the team wants to do that, that's outside our purview. Absolutely not. There was never a discussion. Look, we know the controversy that occurred with the building of this facility. We want people to focus on the positives of keeping the Brewers here. And I think that we were successful when the Bucks had to build a new arena for the Fiserv Forum in finding a way that we did not have to have new revenues that were put on the table. We did it by simply showcasing the obvious, which is if the team leaves, all the income tax generated leaves with them. Same model is utilized here. If you remember, the Bucks deal, broad bipartisan support, supported by the locals and state officials. This is a very similar model, and frankly has a higher state contribution because we generate more income tax revenue from the Brewers and their organization than we do from the Bucks. So it makes sense that we have a greater share.
And I would add to that, you know, we really focused on the facts of the finances here. And when we met with Fiscal Bureau, they only wanted to attribute 14% of that sales tax revenue would leave if the Brewers left, because it would be spent elsewhere in the state. Very hard to make that same argument if you're coming from the other 5 counties that contributed in the past, that if the Brewers leave, it's now going to cost us. So Fiscal Bureau will clearly back up every single dollar that's in this bill, whether it's the appreciation on salaries, the contributions from the cities or the counties. So this is a clear win-win for the entire state. Oh, we got a lot more than what they offered at the beginning. Obviously, the governor's proposal was it had no contribution from the Brewers. So the Brewers, they run a successful organization. They listen to the people. We've talked about a number of ways to fund the stadium. They were very cognizant throughout the process. Whatever they did, they didn't want to raise the cost of attendance to the citizens or the attendees that come here and their fans. So we tried structuring a deal that doesn't raise ticket taxes, doesn't do any of that, and still drives the attendance up, because the financing model for baseball is way different than football, way different than basketball. But I will tell you, the Brewers have stepped up in a large way, and I think you're going to see a lot of ancillary development in the area, because business, what do we need more than anything, is certainty. And the certainty that they will be here, so if ands or buts through 2050, is going to drive economic development throughout this area.
That's just the one last thing that we didn't really touch on, is that this agreement requires an ironclad commitment from the Brewers that they cannot leave until 2050. So that's also incredibly important for us, so they can't halfway through the lease decide they're going to move to another place. The Brewers are signing a contract with us if this deal goes through to guarantee that they'll be here through at least 2050. So that's important. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your time today.